My name's Richard Oldfield. This layout is Johnstown Road, which is part of Barrowmell Model Railway Group, and we're here at the National Exhibition Centre. Johnstown Road was the dream of a man called John Staneker, who sadly suffered from cancer and ultimately lost that battle. And in 2002, he spoke to one of our members called Emlyn Davis and said, could he assemble a group of modellers who would like to take his dream forward and bring Johnstown Road into reality? And that's roughly what we've got here. What you can see is an L-shaped layout that consists of two parts. First part Johnstown Road and the second part Porthnevin. The first bit, which was John Staneker's dream, was completed in 2003 and it was renamed Johnstown Road in honour of him. And the real advantage of Johnstown Road is that Emlyn Davis has been building Cambrian Railway locomotives and stock for the last 30 years. And so we've got a ready-built pool of stock of exactly the right period that we can show off to people. Because it was so much fun, we added another 20 feet to the layout in order to portray more architectural features of the Cambrian railways and also to give our trains a longer run. We just use people according to their skills and tastes. So I could actually take you through all the parts of Johnstown Road and just pick out the different names. You know, Emlyn Davis is a skilled back scene painter and he's done the back scenes. Another of our member, Richard Stagg, likes signal boxes and the signal boxes are by him. The buildings, I've built some, John Staneker built some, Emlyn built some. As long as we think we're achieving an even and attractive standard, we invite as many members of the group to contribute in whichever way they wish. It's a traditional DC layout, which probably reflects the fact that the locomotives already existed before DCC came about. And it's run on, it's effectively a branch line with an intermediate station. And we run to a strict operating sequence so that all the stock we actually own is before the public sometime during a 3-hour period. We go out with our layouts about 4 or 5 times a year. The main challenge of taking Johnstown Road to an exhibition is to make sure it looks beautiful, fresh and new for the public. So the really hard work before a show is cleaning all the structures, re-greening and trying to identify the faults that your eyes get used to but strangers might see instantly. There is a wide variety of locomotives. I think we now have at least one example of all the classes that the Cambrian Railways had at the time of the layout. There's just a couple that are missing at this moment in time. And by and large, obviously the Cambrian kept the larger locomotives for the bigger, faster trains, but effectively the general purpose locomotives could be used happily on freight, passenger or mixed freight trains. You have to remember that some of the Cambrian Railways' smaller branches were, let's say, not frequently used, and the Cambrian Railways, being short of money as well, tended to buy locomotives wherever they happened to be cheapest. So don't look for a theme in the locos, look for lots of little oddities.
In this month's BRM, we've got some really nice work on the scenery of Barmouth Junction. And one of the features that really stood out for us was the hedges. So we thought we'd have a look at how you make hedges for a model railway. All railway lines in the UK, apart from light railways, are fenced in at the sides, and hedges are of course incredibly popular, and we see hedges everywhere, alongside the roads, alongside our gardens, that sort of thing. And the simplest way to do some hedges is quite simply to buy some pre-made ones. So here we are. This is a pack of hedging from Gagemaster, and here's my little scene. These great long furry snakes, best described. Hedges. All you need, a bit of PVA glue, and push the hedge firmly into the glue. You might want to hold it, perhaps put a little bit of weight on it, and there we are, job done. That was quick, wasn't it? Well, you want some more? You want me to do more of this sort of thing? Okay, right, let's be honest. This is a really nice garden hedge, but in areas where topia isn't their speciality and they look a bit more rough and ready, there's quite a lot more work we can do on these sort of things. So that's before the glue dries. The first thing is that, let's be honest, this has been cut out of a machine. It's really neat and tidy, but we can fix that with a pair of scissors. Now, it's worth taking a look at real hedges before you start hacking away. I'm a bit rough and ready with this, but hedges have changed over the years. Get out there and you'll notice that a lot of hedges beside the roads have been cut with a flail cutter. So they have a very distinctive pointed profile, with usually a flat top as the flails go along the flat top, and then pointed sides as the guy's driven along with the tractor there. Alternatively, you've got the far more rural hedges where they've just been let loose, and you can see that's really what I'm aiming for with this. Hacking away a little bit willy-nilly with the scissors. Probably best not to use the best scissors in the house for this sort of thing, but something reasonably sharp, because this is quite dense material, this stuff. And there we are. Already my hedge is looking a little bit more natural, shall we say. However, it's still also a funny colour. Well, it's a nice standard colour. I mean, to be fair, there's quite a lot of different greens in here, which makes it a particularly good product to work with to start with. But I like to add a little bit more variety still. And so what I've got is a can of hairspray and a few packs of, I think these are Woodland Scenics flock powders. I find it quite useful to use these sort of these sort of tubs from the local Chinese, if I'm honest, to put these sort of things in. Just keeps them under control. And there we have it, a couple of packs of flock, coarse flock and fine flock. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my hedge a quick spray, and then sprinkle a little bit of flock powder on it as well. Adds a bit of colour there. And put my PVA back down. There we are, looking a bit better already. But that's great. My hedge can get smaller, but what happens if you want a bit more bulk to your hedge? Because you often see them get quite chunky in places, and this is where you put you find the coarser flock. Great way of building up the hedge profile, and you can work this all the way along until you've got some more attractive and interesting undergrowth than the stuff straight out of the packet. Again, so nothing wrong with the stuff straight out of the packet if you're doing gardens and that sort of thing where people have clipped them nicely. But here we are, we're just adding a bit more life to a railway. Oh yeah, simple 5 minutes worth of work. However, there is a bit more to hedging. You didn't think I'd get away with it quite so quickly on this film. Now, if you want a really, really coarse hedge, then one of the materials to look at, again available from many scenery suppliers, is this stuff, which is what we call rubberized horsehair. Now you'd find this in a lot of old furniture, and certainly if you go to an upholstery supplier, they will sell you enormous sheets of it. That makes the model railway suppliers a bit more practical, because you really don't need a 6x4 sheet very often for your layout. And this is great because, again, you can cut it with scissors to make it about the right size for your hedge, but it's especially good for 7mm modelers. Because obviously, you know, this is lovely in 4mm, it'll look great, but in 7mm you want a bit more detail. And so you need to start considering how a hedge actually grows. Now, a hedge isn't just a single plant. What it is it's a number of trees that are all sat next to each other, and they've all intermingled. So what I'm going to do to represent that in 7mm form is I'm going to take some tree trunks, or in this case brown painted cocktail sticks, and I'm going to use those as the basis of my hedge. Now you can see I've got quite a nice hill here. It's quite a steep hill, and bear in mind that the tree trunks, even on the steep hill, will grow vertically. A little bit of PVA on the bottom of that one, and I'm just drilling holes in my hill and poking the trunks in. To be honest, I don't really need the glue. They'll stick quite nicely as they are. That one's a bit long, so I'll just snap that off with my fingers. Don't worry about the pointy bits. If you're really worried, you can pull the pointy bits off at this stage, but we're about to cover them up with rubberized horsehair. There we go. Okay, there we are. There's my tree trunks, and this will be the hedge. Now it's quite wide. Again, worth looking at the widths of hedges. Some are very, very wide. Narrow garden ones, obviously, you tend to keep them fairly thin, because otherwise you give up all your flower beds to those. And that's trimmed, but it's still like the pre-made hedge. It's still a bit regular, so we'll just trim it a little bit more topiary. You can cut it into attractive shapes if you're feeling like you need to do something a bit more artistic, but I'm just hacking mine around so it looks a bit random. A little bit more glue on top of the trunks. And then push that on top. Don't push it all the way down, because then you can actually see the gaps under the hedges. Again, the hedges and the undergrowth home to an awful lot of wildlife, and it's worth thinking about that. So you want it, because you don't want to hide all the fact that you've just put a load of trunks in there. Let's do a little bit more, got a couple more here, so let's use them up. And again, you can see that this is a really easy and quick way of making sure that your hedges follow the landscape, because obviously hedges do follow the landscape, and so unless you've got completely flat baseboards, which I certainly don't recommend, because that certainly doesn't look natural, a little bit more of that, and a little bit more glue. I'm just going to cheat and move that one there, so that me horsehair has got something to grab hold of. Now you could paint this stuff brown, but if I'm honest, it's not a bad base colour already. I'm assuming, of course, that you are modelling in the summer, which is, of course, the most popular period of the year for layouts to be modelled. If you're doing it in winter, it's a much more complicated task, and at that point I do recommend you go and look at some hedges just to see how difficult that's going to be. I'm going to cheat slightly, I'm going to tilt my baseboard back. A little bit of grass on, a little bit of scatter on there. I think, in fact, that's looking nice. In fact, I've got another colour down here. Let's just add a bit more colour. You can see this is all pretty messy work, but do the back of the hedge as well. It's all pretty messy work, but it's all good fun, and a surprisingly quick way of making changes to your layout. There we go. And there we have it. Instant hedgerow. Who says modelling needs to take time? Now, I mean, I've done this really, really quickly. You can obviously spend a bit more time if you want. Here's another one I did earlier. This is on the scene we did last year in BRM, and obviously the hedge is made in exactly the same way. I've just spent a bit more time cutting and forming it, and I've tried to make it look reasonably neat because we're obviously in a garden situation. So the neater, more single colour hedge is much more appropriate. But there we are. Nice, simple, quick and easy method of adding a bit of life to your layout, and hopefully again using very, very few materials, so nothing that should scare anybody off. Hope this helps you. I look forward to seeing lots of hedges appearing on layouts soon.
So as you can see, we're here at Great Eastern Models to do the practical live inside the model shop. And there can't be a better venue to do anything like that. And well, it's a scenic demonstration day, so I thought let's give a little demonstration by painting a skip. This is a moulded skip in resin. It's manufactured by Skytrex, and you might think, nah, it's probably an easy kit to paint, but actually, if you look inside there, you can see we've got all sorts going on. There's some bricks, a bit of rubble, some aluminium window frames, bits of wood. You name it, there's all sorts in this skip. Very nice clean moulding, but painting it could be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to go through some products here today that we'll be using to paint this kit and, well, try and make it look as realistic as possible, but also a little bit textured and a little bit weathered and grubby. We've got some paints here from Darkstar. Now, Darkstar tends to be a manufacturer of paints for the sort of wargaming side of things rather than model railways, but it has a great range of this molten metals. Look out for that if you're ever at a show. They have some great metallic colours, specifically useful for painting the insides of sort of the back heads of your cabs and locomotives. We've got sort of bronze colours here, which are great for pipe work. Different sort of things like tarnished steel for, say, buffer shanks, things like that. All sorts of different useful colours in that range. We've also got some acrylic colours from Comart here. And of course, where would we be without the good old weathering powders? So this is a selection here from DCC Concepts. We've got some dry rust, we've got some red oxide and some track rust. And we'll just make a bit of a combination on this bit of a make-do palette here that I've found lying around the shop to start painting.
So for the basis of this project, I'm using one of Humbrol's acrylic cream colours, making sure that it's thoroughly stirred before introducing a little bit of DCC Concepts black weathering powder. Now of course you can mix in as much as you want of this, make sure you get a nice realistic colour of concrete, and for this there's nothing better to apply it than a very fine pointed brush. Of course, work from the lowest areas first and then work your way up to the top so that it makes painting much easier. And for the brick, well, I'm using one of Comart's red oxide colours, into which I'm also introducing some of the red oxide colour from DCC Concepts. Again, a fine pointed brush is ideal for this sort of work. Now for the rust colours, the same applies. I've used some of the red oxide and mixed in a little bit of the rust weathering powders just to get that extra texture. For the outside colour of the skip, I've chosen yellow. Of course you could choose blue or any of the other many colours of skips that you see around. But make sure that it is weathered quite heavily because skips do get a rough life. So for this I've used a combination of dry brushing, using a very fine detail brush, and just highlighted some of the areas with a large brush, making sure to drag that colour down to get those sort of rusty rain streaks.
So with the skip now fully painted and weathered, I think it's time to glue it in place on a diorama. So the little skip has now dried beautifully, we're back in the studio, and it's time to glue it in place on this diorama that you may recognise we featured in BRM in a previous issue. Now for this, to glue it into place, I'm going to use a glue that we haven't featured in the magazine before. It's called Fix and Flex, and it's from Deluxe Materials. Now, as the name suggests, this is a glue which has a certain degree of flexibility, and that makes it ideal for scenic items which are likely to be knocked occasionally if you're cleaning tracks, so things such as trees, telegraph poles, even buildings to some extent, because if they're quite rigid, especially objects like these little pallets here where you might accidentally knock them. So it's sold in a 70 gram tube, and is perfect for gluing items such as foam to foam without any risk of it melting, but also painted items. It won't attack paint. So let's just whip off the tube, and it dries roughly at a rate of about 1 to 2 millimeters per hour, so don't need too much on there, just 2 little strips, maybe a third one down the side. It's also got a great gap filling ability. Now this means that because this is a resin moulding and the bottom of the skip isn't perhaps perfectly flush and level, and of course the baseboard and the weathering that we've got here with some undulations isn't perfectly level either, it'll ensure that we've got a good bond between the two surfaces. And we'll place it into position. Let's see, let's have it maybe there. Good push down into place, and we'll just leave that to dry. So as mentioned before, what else is this glue useful for? Well, you can glue plastics and metal to foam, you can glue metal to plastic, you can glue wood to metal to plastic to foam, you name it. This is fairly strong, it's fairly resilient, and it's also got that degree of flex to it. So I'm also going to show you how easy it is to just glue a tree in position. This one here, for instance, so we put a good dollop around the outside, and we'll just test this once it's dry and see how resilient it is once in place on this fictitious baseboard that we've got here. It's just a piece of wood, but let's suppose that's our baseboard. Position it into place there, and I just want to see how strong and tough that is, just to prove that to you. We'll come back to that when it's dry. So it's a couple of hours later, we're now back in the studio, and it's time to see if our glue has done the trick. So let's give this tree a good old shake and see if I can make it part. Nothing happening there at all, it's going absolutely nowhere. Of course, this is great on a layout. In fact, the tree is actually starting to part on its natural plastic base there, so I'm likely to break the tree before I actually make it separate from the bit of wood there. So that's one test, but of course there are many different hosts of different uses for this glue. For example, gluing the many ready-to-plant structures that are available now from a variety of manufacturers, or indeed scenic accessories onto your layout. So if you'd like to get hold of a tube of Fix and Flex from Deluxe Materials, the strong, resilient, gap-filling adhesive, visit your local Deluxe Materials stockists or take a look at them online.
Traintech specialises in using technology to make model railway electronics much easier for people to use. It's taken about 2 years development from the original idea. It started really by some people getting new to model railways, coming here and asking us, when they see our signals, do they change automatically? Being quite naive and just not knowing that they did. Well, when enough people come to you and say, do your signals change automatically, you realise that that's actually what they want to do, and they haven't got the time to change signals and do all of that as well. So that's why we started developing this. And as I said, we've totally designed and engineered and tooled this in Britain. I'm David from Traintech. One of our latest creations is this, which is a sensor signal. It's an automatic signal which you can either plug into the track or wire in, and has a sensor built in and can help you create completely automatic block signalling. Well, you can buy one individual signal if you wish, and that will change from green, which it normally would be, to red as soon as the train passes. The real power of the system is when you combine several together. Linking them with just one wire between each signal allows you to create what's called automatic block signalling, where each section is protected from the previous one. And it's just like the real railway, this as well. This is not synthetic. This is how 60% of the signals on the real railway work now, where trains are only allowed to enter into one section, only one train at a time, and that should prevent collisions between trains. To fit signals is very, very simple. If they have DCC already, that means that power is on the track all the time, and literally these can slide into the track like a power clip, and literally within a minute or two they could wire up 3 or 4 signals and have automatic signals on the layout. If they're DC, they can still be powered by 12 volts DC. They just need to cut these fingers off and connect 2 wires to it. So still well within half an hour to actually do it themselves. There's lots of other products, of course, we do as well, and many of those as well are very easy and quick to fit. One of the things that people have difficulty doing is lighting carriages. It's something that does add realism. Most carriages have lighting, but until now it's been something quite difficult to do. You have to add pickups on the wheels to pick up the power from the track, and of course if the track is not live all of the time, as it is with DCC, then the lights go off as soon as the train stops. Very unrealistic. This is a product we created called a coach light strip, which has a series of lights on it. The key innovation about it is that it's motion activated. So normally the product is off. As soon as it sees any movement, the lights switch on, and then they stay on while the train moves, and when the train stops they still stay on for 4 minutes, and then if it's after 4 minutes it hasn't moved, it just switches off. This allows anybody to fit a coach light into a coach like this. So this is a normal coach body, take it off, you could literally stick up a coach light in the top with blue tack and you've lit your coach. Each battery will last for 70 or 80 hours. And as I said, it switches off in between when it's stopped moving, so you don't need to worry about adding switches or wires or any pickups. If they're online, they can certainly search Train Tech and they'll find train-tech.com. They can also send us an email to sales@dcpmicro.com. Searching YouTube and all those sort of channels, lots of other people have also written about us and the things we do. Or they can phone us up, a good old-fashioned phone call to 01953 457 800, and that'll reach us, and we'll send them one of these free brochures.